Speaking of good things, joining us now, Congressman, 1st District, Republican, Virginia, Rob Wittman. He's also the ranking member on the subcommittee for Sea Power Readiness. And Rob Wittman going to Norfolk today as part of a congressional delegation. Congressman, great to have you, sir.
Good morning, John. Great to be with you.
Tell us what's going on in Hampton Roads. Why are you going to be here?
Well, we have a congressional delegation of Virginia members. We're going to start off visiting Admiral Grady at Fleet Forces Command to get a brief and a laydown of Navy operations across the spectrum to understand what the challenges are and for us to give Admiral Grady our perspective on the things that need to continue to happen with the Navy, not just the new ships that are being built. There will be 12 new ships delivered this year to the United States Navy, but also what we're doing to maintain the ships that we have. From there, we will go to the Norfolk Naval Shipyard to visit the great ship maintainers there at our public shipyard. And, of course, Norfolk Naval Shipyard is one of the critical assets for our nation, but we also need to do a lot of work to upgrade that facility so it can do the work in the future. And then later on, we will go over to Huntington Ingalls Industries, better known as Newport News Shipbuilding. And we'll go over there to visit the great shipbuilders that are building our Ford-class carriers and our Virginia-class submarines, and talk to the great folks there about the things that they're doing and the challenges they face in the future. And, of course, as you know, in the President's budget this year, good news, John, the President's actually added an additional Virginia-class submarine to where we will be building 3. If that passes, we will be building 3 Virginia-class submarines on an annual basis as we lead into building the new Columbia class, which is a new ballistic missile submarine. And then we just recently had the agreement for building 2 aircraft carriers at a time. And in the President's budget, there's additional funding to build CVN 81, which is the second of the 2 that will be contracted for CVN 80 and 81. So good things, and we're going to go there and get the information necessary for all of us as decision makers to do the right thing for the nation and in turn for the Commonwealth.
So the number of submarines, Congressman Wittman, that are being added, and I know you've been all over this for some time. You've been calling for additional submarines, especially to put in the Pacific region as a combatant to the Chinese submarine capability, which has gone up dramatically. How does this change the balance of military power in the on the Pacific Rim?
Well, John, hopefully it allows us to catch up. Here's where we are. We're at 51 attack submarines today. Those are the SSN Virginia-class submarines. Because of the retirement rate of the older Los Angeles-class submarines, we will be down to only 42 attack submarines in 2028. What this effort is about is getting the number of Virginia-class submarines back up. It's supposed to be at 66, but we don't reach 66 until 2049. So this is an attempt to get us back up there. We're working with the Navy, too. The Navy's looking at extending the service life on a number of the Los Angeles-class submarines, the 688-class submarines. We have some spare nuclear reactors, and those are there in case we needed them for other purposes. And the plan now is to take those spare nuclear reactors and to put them in these Los Angeles-class submarines, which would give them extended life. As you know, the nuclear fuel in the existing reactors runs out. This would give us the ability to keep a number of those Los Angeles-class submarines going and then add an additional Virginia-class submarine to that. So I think that by 2028, instead of dropping down to 42, we could be right at 50 submarines if all of these pieces of the puzzle come together. So that's what we're working on, is to make sure we don't drop to that low point, because, as you've said, we have 2 curves that are crossing each other. The curve for the Chinese is going up with the number of submarines that they have, and the same for the Russians. The Russians are building more submarines and more advanced submarines, and we will have fewer. That's not a good formula to protect the interest of this country, especially in a place as big as the Pacific, where the only way that we are able to counter the Chinese is to have presence there. And our submarines can do a lot. They are extraordinarily advanced platforms, but quantity has a quality all its own when you get to a certain number, and I would argue the Chinese are quickly approaching that number. They are very aggressively building new submarines, and while they are not nuclear submarines and are diesel submarines, they are quite capable, and with the large number that they have, that becomes a significant issue for us. So this is a pathway for us to counter what the Chinese are doing with their naval fleet and their submarine fleet.
We're with Congressman Dr. Rob Wittman. He's the ranking member Republican on the Sea Power Readiness Committee, the subcommittee. Dr. Wittman, a congressman representing the 1st District of Virginia, that is the Northern Neck area and through Central Virginia and the Fredericksburg area, and he's also a Republican in the minority right now. Congressman, why is 66 subs the magic number? Like, how does the Navy arrive at that?
Well, the Navy arrives at that looking at the capability that we need to have to, first of all, counter our adversaries. Second of all, to engage in operations in all the different theaters. So from the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, as they do an evaluation, that's the number they need to sustain those operations. Now, the Navy goes through a force structure assessment on a fairly frequent basis. In fact, they'll be coming out with a new force structure assessment, which essentially looks at things around the world and says, how many ships do we need going into the future? And as you know, John, the number that the last force structure assessment came up with is 355 ships, 66 of those being these Virginia-class attack submarines. So they will be coming out with a new force structure assessment here in the near future. So there could be a change in the number, and it'll be based upon current conditions around the globe and what the United States needs to have in order to counter our adversaries. And as you know, we've been through a significant period of time since 9/11 to look at what the challenges are out there. And it's, through the years, it's been a counterterrorism, counterinsurgency fight. But now as we've done that, we've seen that our other adversaries in this new era of great power competition have caught up with us. So they'll continue to look at what we need to do to not only keep up, but hopefully in those areas maintain our advantage. And we have had a significant advantage in the undersea world. The question is what do we do to continue to maintain that advantage? And if we don't do things aggressively, if we allow the number of submarines that we have to decrease, then I believe strongly that we will not have that undersea advantage, and that's a significant problem. And remember, if you don't have that advantage, you are actually invite aggression by your adversaries, because if they think that you can counter them, then it's not in their interest to come after you. But if they think they have an advantage, I believe strongly that they will do that. And we've seen China and Russia take advantage of that in the past, and that's not where we want to be as a nation. Well,
especially with those islands right in the South China Sea, the Chinese have been very aggressive with that. We have talked about, and you have made the argument some time ago consistently that the Navy needed 355 ships. In fact, that was one of the things that Trump campaigned on back in 2016 during the election. So 355 was the number, could still be. Where are we now?
John, we're in the 280s now. Again, we're going to be delivering a number of ships this year. I think we are at 282. But I will double check on that number. There's, like I said, there's pretty aggressive schedule of delivering ships. There was a submarine that was delivered recently, but I believe it's right around 282 or 283. So we still have a ways to go to get to 355. And you know, one of the things that I think that people need to understand is it's not only critical that we build new ships, but if you're going to get to 355, you have to maintain the ships that you have in the current inventory, because if you don't maintain them and they essentially wear out before their planned obsolescence, then it's going to make it even more difficult to get to 355, because then you have to retire those ships earlier. So this is something that I think is critical for us to keep in mind with that. And that's one of the reasons why we're going to the ship maintenance yards today, is to make sure we are not only looking at where the new ships are being built, but where the current ships are being maintained, and make sure that we have that continued capacity. So it's that pathway that'll get us to 355. And as I said, the Navy's looking this year at not only the number is 355 continuing to be the right number, but how many ships and of what types, what types of ships, and that's the key to how many submarines, aircraft carriers, amphibious ships, destroyers do we need to have to meet these challenges in the future. So that'll be part of this evaluation also.
So basically, what is the naval ship makeup of that 355 in terms of, what types of ships to meet the challenges and other aggressors that we deal with? So you got to figure that out. Let's get to Let's get to personnel. I mean, you're talking about delivering, over time here, another 20 submarines, right? I mean, that's a lot of subs over whatever period of time. How does the Navy get the personnel for that? I mean, you need submarine commanders. You need all the people that run the technology. They have to know about the subs. I mean, we have a volunteer Navy. So how does the U.S. Navy ensure going forward that they have the personnel in order to man the 20 subs that they're deploying?
John, that's a great question.
Thank you.
It's one of the things that the Navy has begun now, because as you deliver those new ships, you can't wait until the ship shows up ready to be delivered to the Navy and say, well, now we're going to recruit sailors to put those ships to sea. You have to begin that now. So the Navy has begun the effort in recruiting sailors, getting them through the training pipeline, because as you know, those jobs are pretty complex. If you're a sonar operator on a nuclear submarine, that's a pretty intense job. You just don't come out of basic training and go right on board the submarine. If you're a junior officer on a submarine, you go to nuclear school to learn how the nuclear reactor works, to learn how the systems on these subs work, and the same on the aircraft carriers. So they're beginning the process right now of recruiting these sailors and training them to be the crews on those ships as they're delivered into the fleet. That's a key element. And another part of that, too, John, is retaining the sailors that we have, because we need the sailors with the skills to be able to train the new sailors that will be coming in. So it's really a combined approach, recruiting the next generation of sailors and then retaining the sailors that we have, who are the senior non-commissioned officers, the senior NCOs, the chiefs, the senior chiefs, and the master chiefs there in the Navy, as well as the senior officers, the lieutenant commanders, captains that will be commanding these ships and commanding these sailors at sea. So it really is a twofold approach, and the Navy has begun that track because they know that we will need more sailors into the future to make sure these ships are properly crewed and properly operated.
When a typical sub goes out, everybody, especially if you're in Virginia in the mid-Atlantic and you kind of follow the Navy, and many of our listeners are naval personnel, retired and active around the mid-Atlantic region. But Dr. Wittman, when you deploy a sub and you go on a submarine, what is the normal length of time that you are from the time you get on the sub until you get back to dock where you get off? What's the normal deployment time for that at sea?
Well, John, it's always mission specific and where the submarine goes, but normally it's about a 6-month time that they're at sea. Sometimes it's shorter, and remember, not all of it's at sea. So I would say an extended period of time at sea. And remember, these subs have to operate very stealthily. So the key is whether they come up. And of course, what you want to do is not have to surface very often.
Right.
So all of that put together, a normal deployment is about 6 months, and then the time at sea for any continual period of time sometimes can be as much as 45 days continual deployment at sea, and sometimes even north of that. So, and of course, it's all mission dependent. Mm-hmm. And of course, many of these missions are classified missions, so you can't get into specifically, how extended those tours are. But that's normally what these sub commanders see in that tour. And then, of course, the submarines come back. The Navy has tiered readiness, so the submarines come back, and the sailors have a little bit of a rest period, and then they go back into a training cycle so that they can deploy again. These submarines have to be worked on, so they go to the maintenance facilities, the depot facilities to be worked on to make sure that they're fixed so that when they go to sea the next time, they are fully capable. And that's the key with these submarines. They're extraordinarily complex, and it takes a lot of effort to make sure they're maintained and can operate at the highest level. That means that everything on board works and will do the job the sailors need it to do when they're called upon.
It's really fascinating, and you think about this in recruiting sailors and other personnel to go in a submarine. You could be basically on a sub underwater without surfacing for 30, 45, 50, 60, 70 days, depending on what your mission is. I would think that that is not an environment that's going to be conducive for everybody, right? So it must be a tougher recruit.
You have to have a certain mindset. And remember, too, you have to have a family that is mindful of that situation, because when that sub is submerged, there's no communications. That sub doesn't communicate because you don't want the adversaries to know where it's located. So
right.
When you communicate, you essentially radiate. You send out electromagnetic radiation, and that can be detected by your adversary. So, it's a significant operational challenge for not only the submarine to operate that way, but also for the crew members and the family, because there are certain periods of time where they know, hey, I'm not going to hear from my loved one for a period of time. So that's a sacrifice not only for the sailor but also for their family.
Zero communication for up to 60 days if you have a family, not the easiest thing to do. Who is with you today on your congressional delegation?
Sure. Well, we will have Bobby Scott, whose district the shipyard is located in, and where Fleet Forces Command over Norfolk is located in his district, as well as Norfolk Naval Shipyard. We'll have the 2nd District Representative Elaine Luria, and then the 5th District Representative Denver Riggleman will be with us. So we'll have 4 members of the Virginia delegation with us.
Tell Riggleman we said welcome to Hampton Roads.
I will do that.
I don't think he's ever been here.
Denver's got a great military background, so he gets it. He's former Air Force intelligence officer.
He was on our show yesterday, and Congressman Bobby Scott, my congressman, Rob Wittman, I should move into your district, but my congressman, Bobby Scott, as everybody knows, Bobby Scott and I are great friends, so my congressman will be on our show Monday, so we'll be able to get him to tell us what he saw, and you're doing the preview, right? So we got all the bases covered, plus we had Denver yesterday, so we got the whole contingent there. We're out of time. I want to thank Dr. Rob Wittman for being with us, U.S. Representative Congressman, 1st District of Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area, Republican. And he is the ranking member on the Sea Power Readiness Subcommittee, and he's going to be touring the facilities today. Great segment, sir. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, John.